Muted.
Hi, this is Barb Calora with Resolve, the National Infertility Association. We are going to walk through a webinar on preparing for your first appointment. Thank you so much for joining us, and we hope this information is helpful to you. I am the President and CEO for Resolve and am looking forward to hosting this webinar that is sponsored by OVA Science. Joining us today as our expert panelist is Dr. Serena Chen. Dr. Chen is a reproductive endocrinologist. She is board certified in OBGYN, and she is with St. Barnabas Medical Center in New Jersey. Dr. Chen is a passionate, experienced reproductive endocrinologist, and we are so excited, Dr. Chen, that you've joined us today for this really important topic to help people maximize and set expectations for their first appointment. So thank you for joining us.
I'm really happy to be here, Barb. This is one of my favorite topics. Love talking about this stuff, and hopefully people will feel comfortable after we have this short discussion about what to expect.
Wonderful. Next, please. So what to expect at your first visit. So you've made that appointment with the reproductive endocrinologist. Maybe you've been referred. Maybe you went ahead and called yourself, and you want to prepare yourself. We put this webinar together really with you in mind. We want you to get the most out of this appointment, but also to help set up all of your expectations for your treatment plan. And we think the advice that you're going to get today in this webinar will make the most of that first appointment, and you will feel really good about your next steps and how to proceed. So, Dr. Chen, when you think about what to expect at your first visit, what are some of the things that patients should be thinking about?
So I think the important thing to know is that you're in charge. You should have, you don't have to do anything you don't want to do, and you should get answers to all your questions. So if that's not happening, you know that you can, you don't have to stay there. You can go someplace else. You can get another opinion. And so that's what's really important, I do think. And we'll talk about this at the end, how to get in contact with Resolve, because Resolve is your buddy with regard to this types of things. If you're not happy at your first visit, what are the reasons you're not happy? You can talk about it with Resolve. You can get referrals for more opinions to other people. So I think the most important thing to know is that you're in charge of yourself, your body, what you do, and the doctor's really there to provide information and advice and communication and to help figure things out together, a plan together, not, you know, it's not that you're listening to everything the doctor says. You have things that you're concerned about. You want solutions. The doctor should be able to help you find those solutions in a way that makes you comfortable.
So when you think about that first visit, what are some things that we should be thinking about in terms of telling our story, or what has brought you there? What can patients expect from the physician, and also how should they prepare themselves?
So a lot of times we want to know your general health, your reproductive history, like, when were your last few periods? What, have you had any GYN problems in the past? Is there any family history of gynecologic problems, or family history, endometriosis, polycystic ovarian syndrome, premature ovarian failure are all things that run in families and can raise your risk. If you had like a big surgery before or hospitalization, even if the illness has nothing to do with pregnancy or getting pregnant, we still want to know about those things. That can still impact your future in terms of your reproductive future, the types of tests that we'll do, and also future pregnancy. So big health things, it's a good idea to have records, and then basic GYN things like, your last couple of pap smears, if you've had a mammogram, recent testing in the last year, previous fertility treatment, all of those things can be helpful to bring to the first appointment.
Excellent, great. Next, please. So people think about their own story, Dr. Chen, and they're very familiar with it, but what should they focus on and what should they be prepared to talk about in that first meeting with the reproductive endocrinologist regarding their own story?
So I do think, this slide definitely covers the basics of what we want to know about. But I do also, of course, the doctor has their perspective of what they want and, past reproductive history, pregnancies, miscarriages, live births, the GYN history, sexually transmitted diseases, any abnormalities, and general medical issues are all things that I want to know about. But that number one thing, how do you tell your story? I still want to know what's important to you. Like, there are things that are going to be important to me, but everything is colored by your perspective. What is bothering you right now? Maybe you don't want to get pregnant and you're just thinking, oh, I'm going to get pregnant in 5 years, but, my sister's having trouble now. What are the things I need to know now? So the way I treat that patient is obviously going to be very different than the way I treat somebody who wants to get pregnant right away. But both of those people still need advice and some evaluation.
Great, thank you. Next, please. So continuing with telling your story, you've gone over some of this already with family history, but what about the male partner? Because I know that most of the people that come to Resolve are women, but clearly men may be watching this webinar as well, and we focused a lot on female health. How do you bring up that part about the male history? Should the male partner be there at that first appointment, and how should they be prepared to talk about their story?
I think it's great when the guys come in to the visit, so that's always helpful, but I never make it a requirement because sometimes the male not feeling comfortable coming in is something that we have to address. And not everybody comes to me with a partner, or it's not everybody is a female with a male partner, but if there is a male partner, then his health is very important because obviously you need a sperm and an egg to make a baby, and guys often feel like this is a female issue, but it's obviously 50-50 male and female, and a lot of specific fertility issues are caused by only male factor. Many are caused by both the male and female partner, and regardless of who may have a fertility issue, obviously both partners are involved, and this is a wonderful opportunity, I think, for us to address male health, and general male health actually really affects reproduction. So if the male partner is smoking, if he's overweight, if he hasn't seen his primary care doctor in ages, those are all opportunities to get healthier, and it does make a difference.
And I love this last point about goals and concerns. I think for coming in for the first appointment as a patient, being very prepared with thinking this through, maybe even jotting down some notes before you go in and thinking about goals and concerns. What are some of the things that you've heard from patients in that setting where they have come in prepared? Obviously, they're going to come in if one of, I shouldn't say obviously, but if one of their goals is, I want to have a baby. But concerns, I mean, tell us a little bit about what are some things that you have heard before and some of our listeners could get advice on how to prepare themselves for this particular goals and concerns advice.
So it is really important to be open with your doctor about it. Like, sometimes I'll spend a really long time with a patient. We do lots of testing, and we don't necessarily address the bubble over their head. They're worried about, like, a family member who had a history of early breast cancer or something like that, and what are the things that we can do about that to address those concerns, or they're worried about birth defects, or they have a friend who had miscarriages, or they had a friend who went through fertility treatment and just had a bad experience, and they're very, very concerned about that, and yet they don't raise that with the doctor, then I can't really address it. I mean, I try to be reassuring with everybody and be as complete as possible, but each person does have their own viewpoint of their story and where they want to go with their family building options. and it is important to talk about those things. And what if you don't want to get pregnant right now, or what if you're concerned that your partner doesn't want to get pregnant now, and you're trying to decide, what am I going to do about this? Is that okay? Should I freeze my egg? Should I even, I've even had patients considering, well, maybe this is not the person I'm going to stay with, depending on what the doctor says. But if the doctor's not involved in that conversation, then obviously I can't really be a resource for you.
Great advice. Next, please. So when you come to that first appointment, we want to help patients be prepared and maybe even have some questions already written out that they can ask. And so we've come up with what we think are some of the best questions. Do you want to walk through these for us and maybe just give us any other advice you have on how to prepare for some of these questions? So this is patients asking you these questions, right?
Yes, absolutely. They should ask me these questions, and I think, again, it's important to know that you're the person in charge. So the doctor is going to take care of a lot of medical things, but you still have to make these decisions. This is usually not like a life or death type of consult. So there are choices. A lot of times we are working against the biological clock, but it's not so urgent that you can't digest the information, look at the pros and cons of each option, and know that regardless of what your doctor says, often there are several options and choices that are still reasonable, even if your doctor doesn't necessarily think they're optimal. And I think that you have to feel comfortable. So, if you and your doctor are totally on the same page about the treatment plan, that's great. But if you're not, or you have questions, that's the time to bring them up in person with the doctor and say, I'm not sure I'm ready for IVF now. Are there other options? I'm a person who likes to do things more naturally, or maybe I'm a really high-tech person, and you're saying do IUI, and I really want to think about IVF because my friend had great success with IVF. There is more than one right pathway to take in fertility often. There are often multiple choices. So I think that's why it's important that this be a dialogue and not just the doctor directing the patient.
Great. Wonderful. Next, please. So continuing with questions that people should be prepared with, if you could walk through these questions and tell us why they're important to ask in that first appointment, that would be great.
So age definitely does affect egg health. Unfortunately, there really is a biological clock. So it is important to think about age and to talk to the doctor about age. And within a certain age, there's also some people who have better fertility and lower fertility, and we do have ways to try and measure those things like your FSH level and your AMH level, anti-Müllerian hormone. So that's something that we can give you some idea about. It's not a crystal ball, but it is important to talk with the doctor about that. Out-of-pocket expenses. Almost everybody in the United States these days has out-of-pocket expenses, even good insurance. And if you don't have insurance coverage, it's important to know that you're not alone, that a lot of people don't have insurance coverage, and most fertility doctors should be able to try to work with you and what coverage you do have to try to help make things affordable. Resolve has a lot of resources to talk about those things as well. And of course, Resolve is trying to advocate for more coverage of what we think is a very important activity, family building, that should be covered. Needles, faith-based and cultural concerns come up all the time. You shouldn't feel like that's something that should not be discussed with the doctor. A lot of people are afraid of needles. A lot of people have religious and cultural concerns about the treatments. And, if it's not for you, it's not for you. And usually we can find a solution that will still help you get to the family part, but not compromise what you feel is like your integrity, and hopefully get you through any kind of procedures without feeling too anxious. So it's important to raise those things with the doctor. And convenience, logistics, hours of operation, office policies, things like that. It's important to know those things. And I try to tell my patients, you know, we will try to make things work for you. Obviously, we have our routines of the way we do things, but you know, you have a really big meeting, your husband can't make it that day, you know, you have an issue, you know, talk to us. I think a lot of it's about communication. Let us know what's going on with you so, you know, we can help you with those types of things. And,
Dr.
you know, what
Chen,
do I do next?
Yeah, no,
is obviously the biggest question, and, and you should get some very direct information about that.
You know, I was just looking at these questions, Dr. Chen, and from Resolve's perspective, I can tell you that question number 4, 5, and 6 are questions that actually prevent people from ever even walking in your door. So they may hear something in the news, they may think they're too old, they may think this is too expensive, they may think that there's no way to do this that meets with their faith or their religious beliefs, and they frankly never even walk in the door. And so I'm so glad that we included these questions, because what we want to try and encourage people to do is to take that first step. Get yourself into your office or the office of a reproductive endocrinologist, and as you said from the very beginning, take responsibility, but put these questions right out there. Look, are there other options from, I love how you said there are other options on all of these things, whether it be related to age, whether it be related to expenses, whether it be related to your faith, and we as patients don't know that, and with our diagnosis. So very important, and I'm so glad to hear you say that these are good questions for people to come in prepared to ask. Let's go on to the next.
Barb, if anybody feels uncomfortable with any of the answers, that, you know, every doctor is different, and sometimes it may take seeing more than one provider to find an office or a person that you're comfortable with, because some of it is it is very personal.
Very good advice. Next question, or next slide, please.
So this goes through some of the basic tests, and obviously we have to check the sperm, the uterus and the tubes. We need to check ovarian reserve, I mentioned earlier. That's kind of related to the aging process, where we check FSH and anti-Mullerian hormone. And again, it's not a crystal ball, but we can give you some idea of the health of your ovaries. Preconception health testing, that's really important. We don't want to just get you pregnant. We want you to have a healthy pregnancy. So your general health is quite important. And, you know, so stuff like being a healthy weight and eating right, those things do make a difference, not just the stuff in the doctor's office. So it's definitely a team effort. And the preconception genetic testing is really exploding. Like now we can check for thousands of mutations and hundreds of genes with just one tube of blood, and that can really help pregnancy planning. And it's not just people who would, you know, who would not end a pregnancy because of a severe genetic mutation. It's also about planning for a pregnancy or planning for a child that might have special needs. So the genetic testing really can, I think, help a lot of different people. And you know, you should be able to talk about those things in detail with your doctor.
Great. Next slide, please. So what are some of the things that really can help us influence our fertility? Are there things that we could be doing, and what are some of these top concerns?
So obviously we can't turn back the biological clock. I would love to do that for all of us, you know, just to turn back the clock. But I do think that even though we can't do something about number one, number two, you know, there are certain basic genetic things that we can't do anything about, but I do think that being healthy in general, so I like the fact that you have egg and health together in that slide, your health does impact on things. So there, you know, maybe you're born with decreased, diminished ovarian reserve, and that's not something we can do something about, but if you're carrying 50 extra pounds, that's going to make that problem worse. Or if you're underweight, or if you're not eating healthy, or if you're smoking, all of those, that can take a bad problem and make it much worse. So the things that you do about your health and really do make a difference. So, and that really plays into male factor as well. You know, there's this craze about all guys may, you know, find out if you have low testosterone and run out and take testosterone, and meanwhile taking testosterone can totally knock out your sperm, so we don't want you to do that. But meanwhile, nobody talks about how, again, carrying 50 extra pounds will lower your testosterone, and hey, losing weight and exercising will, for the guys, will raise their testosterone in a natural and healthy way that's not going to affect their sperm. Endometriosis and polycystic ovarian syndrome, I know you mentioned, because there are, if you have it in your family, there's a much higher chance that you have it yourself. And to be proactive and go see a doctor who can talk with you about things you can do to lower your risks of the consequences of endometriosis and PCOS is always a good thing. Even if you're not ready for a family right now, it's good to get a checkup and to be checked for those things if you have them in your family.
Great. Next slide. So what are some of the things that patients should be considering as they are presented with a treatment plan from their physician?
So I love this slide because I think this highlights what Resolve does, is that you guys provide all kinds of things like advocacy and support groups and referrals to doctors and other practitioners. And it is important to know that you're a whole person. You're not just you're not like a medical problem. And stress does play a role. It does not cause infertility. So I don't like this idea of you're causing your own fertility and you should just relax. That's just blaming the patient for their own problem. Infertility is real. It's not in your head, but it does really mess with your head. And so finding ways to have support, either through friends or family or a therapist or a support group, and those can be online or in person. There's a lot of great resources out there, and it is important to make sure you're kind of in a good place emotionally and mentally so you can handle whatever medical treatment you're going through. So I'm glad you put this slide up there because it is really important.
Great. Next slide, please. So you've been saying this this whole webinar, being your own advocate, and you come first. And I think, you know, I just want to summarize here because I'm hearing you and I'm listening to you and I'm totally understanding. We want you to communicate. We've heard that over and over from Dr. Chen, being aware of your overall health, talking about stress management, being informed and involved, and not feeling as if, gee, I forgot to ask that, I should have done this, not having any regrets. This really just summarizes, quite honestly, everything that you've already said. If we could go to the next slide. So here are some really great resources. First of all, you can follow Dr. Chen on Twitter. She is a habitual Twitter and tweets on a regular basis, but it's really good stuff. It's really good links and comments and information, and I highly recommend that you follow her on Twitter. We have some other great resources here. The St. Barnabas website, which is the sbivf.com, reproductivefacts.org, ACOG, which is the American Congress of Obstetricians and Gynecologists. They've got great information at egghealth.com, and Resolve's website, resolve.org. I want to thank OVA Science for their support of Resolve and especially for sponsoring this particular webinar on this topic, which I think is fantastic. And Dr. Chen, I want to thank you so much for this great advice that you have given to all of us today. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
No, I just want to thank you for having me. I think, you know, hopefully people will feel comfortable going to actually get advice. I think that's why we're here, is to try to let you know you should not be intimidated, and you can come in and get some real advice, and then you can decide what you do. That is completely up to you. But make an informed decision. Don't have any regrets. Don't sit at home being anxious. Just come in and get your answers and make your decisions for yourself.
Great, and I think there's one more slide, if there is. and just more resources here for Resolve, and you can always email Resolve at info@resolve.org for any questions that you have. If you can't find something on our website or you need more information, that's really a great tool, is to email us. And thank you all again. Thank you, Dr. Chen. Really appreciate it. Hope you have a great day, everyone. Thank you.